OTB AM.
You're welcome back to OTB AM. It is 3 minutes past 8 on this Tuesday morning. If you've just joined us, you can catch the full Liam Griffin chat back now on the OTB Podcast Network or on youtube.com/off the ball. It is a fantastic conversation and well worth seeking out if you've got any interest in the GAA and where it's going over the next couple of months. If you are just catching up on your news this morning, you might have missed this sad story overnight that former Manchester United and Ireland defender Tony Dunne has passed away at the age of 78. Nathan Murphy is with us for the morning until 10 o'clock. And Nathan, this is a man you would have been thinking about quite a lot actually over the last couple of weeks, especially when you're doing your Manchester United piece with John Giles.
Yeah, he was in John Giles' all-time Manchester United 11 and his all-time Republic of Ireland 11. What an incredible career Tony Dunne had. Over 500 appearances for Manchester United. Arrived at the club in the wake of the Munich disaster and, as John Giles said, was the best left-back in English football for a decade. European Cup winner, part of that European Cup winning side in 1968, and just a true all-round legend of the Irish game. And terribly sad to hear that news last night. And one of those players for so many of us before our time, and it's been one of the great things about talking to John Giles, is hearing the stories of these players. You only have to look at how quickly sport moves on. The FAI have been doing their own all-time Republic of Ireland 11 online on social media over the last few weeks. I think Tony Dunne got 1% of the vote when they were talking about left back, simply because that generation, they don't remember him. There's very little footage. You can watch back to 68 final, you see a very solid defender. The one and the easiest comparison to make, as John did himself when he was picking his Manchester United team, is with Dennis Irwin. He was just a very solid, reliable left back. There was nothing particularly flashy about Tony Dunne. He did his job. He won his tackles. Very, very difficult to get past. You know, I think, as John said, in 10 years, he never saw anybody give him the runaround. Good passer of the ball, you know, rock solid mentality, and a good personality as well. So clearly a great, great player for Manchester United, and to be very much in that mix when United are talking about their greatest ever left backs, and to be part of that first ever side that won the European Cup in 68, I think cements his legendary status.
This is the sort of thing that John Giles affords us, the comparison between that era and this era, where we can't possibly hope to even put Tony Dunne in a modern context, whereas he's actually played alongside them, played alongside some of those greats, witnessed as a pundit some of the modern greats, and really gives us a great sense of how great these players were. And Tony Dunne is one of these players, and of course, as you mentioned, you spoke about it on Thursday Night Football with John Giles. Here's what John had to say about Tony Dunne at the time.
Left back, I've got Tony Dunne.
Two Irish players on the two full-back positions.
Yeah. And a lot of people, like Tony's going back to my time, so a lot of people wouldn't remember Tony. But Tony was very similar in temperament to Dennis Irwin. Did the job quietly, but terrific. He was very quick, Nathan. He played the Manchester United's great years. He was in the Manchester United team when they won the league in 1964. And
played
again,
the European Cup final.
The two times that they won at that particular time, and then in the Champions League, or what was then the European Cup, at that particular time. And again, a bit like Dennis, very quiet. He played with great players like Law Best and Charlton. Didn't try to seek the limelight in any way, but really got the job done. Very like Dennis, deceptively quick. Used the ball well. No fuss about him. And it wasn't a big lad, but good in the air. Like Dennis was good in the air as well. But, you know, complete player. No, I never saw anybody give Tony Dunne the runaround.
You were already at Manchester United when he arrived over to England.
Yeah.
Was he somebody who you could tell straight away was going to make it at the top level?
Well, funny enough, I played against Tony under 15,
right,
schoolboy football, and he didn't get in the schoolboy international team.
Right.
Nathan.
So what? You were home farm. He was Stella Maris.
No, he played for Finbar, St. Finbar's. I was Stella Maris at that particular time. But Tony, he wasn't. He became one of the great players. But at number 50, when he was only under 15, you'd never believe that he could progress like he did. He didn't come to England until he was 18, 19. He actually played for Shelbourne a few years in the League of Ireland.
Yeah.
Then he came to Old Trafford, but took to it straight away. You know, he's only at Old Trafford a few months before he got in the team and never went out of it. But again, he was playing with Law Best, Charlton. All these guys were getting the headlines. But Tony got on with the job and was certainly, I think he was the best left back in England for 10 years.
Yeah, strong praise indeed from John Giles chatting about Tony Dunne there on the show a few weeks back. Sheahan is with us coming up to 9 minutes past 8 on this Tuesday morning. I presume that is where you are starting, Shane?
Yeah, it is indeed, lads. So the sad news, as you've said, tributes being paid all morning and all night to former Manchester United and Republic of Ireland defender Tony Dunne, who has passed away at the age of 78. The Dubliner was a member of that United side that won the European Cup in 1968. He also won 2 league championships at Old Trafford and indeed the 1963 FA Cup. Giles, of course, on that team with him, as was Noel Cantwell. So plenty of Irish influence on that team. Dunne went on to make over 500 appearances for United. In fact, only 7 players at United have played more games than he did. Was also an FAI Cup winner with Shells while still a teenager. And as you heard there, his former United and Ireland teammate John Giles saying he was the best left back in England for a decade. To get a game's news this morning, Tony Holohan has poured cold water on the prospect of a half-full Croke Park happening this year. The All-Ireland Championships are set for a mid-October start. GAA President John Horan says they're hopeful of allowing crowds into matches. Horan said the Croke Park could hold 21,000 if current social distancing measures stay in place, or indeed 42,000 if that is reduced to 1 metre. But the Chief Medical Officer says it's too soon to talk about attendances on such a scale. You've already heard him there this morning from 7:30 on OTB AM, but Liam Griffin says apathy is the biggest problem in the GAA at the moment. The former Wexford hurling boss has helped put together several proposals as to how the vast majority of players in the GAA can be accommodated. That's in his current role with the Club Players Association. He says, they say you have to go to Congress and get recognised. I went there and we were slaughtered, so we're not recognised. That full piece is on otbsports.com, or indeed you can get it on the brand new OTB Sports App. You can download that for free right now in the App Store or Play Store. England and Manchester City star Raheem Sterling appeared on the BBC's Newsnight programme last night to discuss the current anti-racism protest movement. He said English football lacks diversity in coaching and backroom teams. Meanwhile, Kick-It-Out chair Sanjay Vandari has called on English football authorities to back clubs and players who make anti-racist gestures when play restarts next week. To snooker, Mark Allen has missed out on a place in the next phase of the Championship League in Milton Keynes. The Antrim Cubist drew with Martin O'Donnell 2-2 late last night, a result which saw him miss out on progressing to the winners phase from Group 11. And yes, I was indeed up until 1:30 last night watching that, of course, as a snooker fan that I am. Ronnie O'Sullivan back in action this afternoon at the Behind Closed Doors event. So if you want to catch him, ITV4 around 3 o'clock this afternoon, the Rocket is in action. League One clubs in football are expected to vote to end their season early when they meet today. If the campaign is brought to a conclusion, points per game will be used to decide the final table. It would mean Tranmere, Southend and Bolton will be relegated to League Two. Adam Lallana is set to sign a very short contract extension with Liverpool. The midfielder's current deal was due to expire on June 30th. But he will be needed for that short period as the champions-elect see out the season. After racing's safe return at Naas yesterday, there's an 8-race card at Leopardstown that takes place this afternoon. The first goes to post there behind closed doors at 1 o'clock. And finally, some rugby from me this morning, lads. New Zealand's Super Rugby teams will take part in a new competition over the next 10 weeks. It'll be the world's first professional sports tournament to allow full crowds in stadiums since the coronavirus pandemic began. The country has gone 2 weeks without a COVID-19 death, and New Zealand Rugby have confirmed the Super Rugby Aotearoa tournament starting this weekend will indeed be played in front of fans.
Shane Hannon, great stuff. Thanks a million for that. Let's tell you what's coming up this morning on OTB AM. We've got the sports pages coming your way in just a moment. We've already gone through Liam Griffin and the kick-off of the show. Next up after that then, Oisin Murphy will be with us, the British champion jockey on the flat. He'll be with us at 8:35 to chat through a remarkable few years in his career, culminating with his first British Classic win in the 2,000 guineas at Newmarket at the weekend. We've got our football best case, worst case scenarios coming up at 8:50. Chelsea amongst the clubs coming up this morning. BMW's Run and Ride. Nathan and Tommy are engaging in a bit of running and a bit of cycling over the next little while, and we're going to be chatting to them about that. And David Myler is coming up at 9:25 to go through his all-time Liverpool 11 in the Premier League era, that is. We'd love to hear your comments. Off the Ball is how you get in touch, or you can comment on the stream below if you happen to be watching on Facebook or on YouTube. Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
Here's how it's looking on otbsports.com. The main story is OTB AM. Former Manchester United and Ireland defender Tony Dunne dies as well, is second on the list there, and the ruthlessness of champions Ronan O'Gara and Matt Williams on elite rugby players, and that's a great chat for Monday Night Rugby last night. You've also got apathy is the biggest problem in the GAA. Liam Griffin on the plight of the rugby players, and OTB Brief is live now. That is our podcast that is live every single morning from around 7 o'clock, where we bring you up to speed on everything that's happening. This morning you've got stuff like Sterling calling out English race issues. He was on Newsnight last night in the BBC. New Zealand rugby being back, as Sheahan has already mentioned, and the stalling of the GAA plans. That is otbsports.com.
Yeah, let's go through some of the back pages in the newspapers then. We'll start with the Irish Independent. The news came through late last night of Tony Dunne's sad death, but he is on the cover of the Irish Independent alongside George Best and Bobby Charlton, very much part of that Manchester United European Cup winning team of 1968. The headline interesting, following on in particular from that conversation with Liam Griffin that we heard earlier on. Croker chiefs to tell county bosses clubs will come first. And there's some interesting detail in this story from Colm Keys around the possible return to play. One of the interesting things, and I think it's been pointed out, is that while county teams, they can't go back training till the 14th of September. We've heard a lot that some are going to try and push that forward. They won't be covered by expenses or insurance before then. But also that these dates maybe aren't set in stone. I know there's a lot of people frustrated that I think it's 11 days when teams are allowed officially go back into full contact training before club championship is going to start. That may actually be brought forward. All of this may be brought forward if things continue to go to plan. The GAA are in constant conversation with the government about this. So we could well end up in a situation where full contact training is brought forward from the 20th of July. And also there may be an extra week potentially available for the club championship, which would again give a little bit more space. The county officers are due to talk with the GAA today in a conference call, and we should get a little bit more clarity on that. But still, I don't think there's going to be any change, it seems, to the date of October 17th for the inter-county game. It's all a bit bloody depressing, isn't it? You know, we sort of felt coming out of this pandemic, everyone would have a different view on every single aspect of life. Yet here we are, a couple of days as lockdown starts to ease, and the same old rows around the GAA and the calendar and club v county, and county managers need to get their players earlier. And even though initially we thought for about 90 minutes on Friday evening when the GAA released this roadmap that there'd be a good 10, 11 week spell for club championship, actually county teams are back 14th of September. The managers want them back earlier, so club championship will have to be finished by the 14th of September, and county teams are going to probably go back training before then anyways. Like, it's just an absolute nonsense.
The one saving grace of this summer was going to be avoiding the cut and thrust of the same old conversations about Gaelic games, the club player versus the county player, and the same things we have at the same time every year. It turns out the same conversations are going to happen, but just at a different time of the year this time. You're right, it is actually kind of depressing when you think about it, and you put it that way, and all those interests are being furthered. I did find it interesting looking at Friday and the roadmap, how the GAA have mentioned perhaps coming up with an overall calendar in terms of how you're going to work this thing over the next little while. There's never really any sense of an overall calendar or a master fixtures plan, to use the correct term. There was never any sense of this master fixtures plan over the last few years or few decades, really, when the GAA was desperately crying out for some sort of coherence and some sort of plan for club players to know when they're going to be in action, or for county players to know when they're going to be in action. I guess it's definitely harder on the former in that list. But now they've been pushed up against the wall. They have come up, or are going to come up with a master fixtures plan. And it'd be very interesting to see if this would be something that perhaps might spark a future master fixtures plan, and all parties could be well served in this. But as you say, the early signs aren't great on that front.
I'm sorry. I do not want to hear inter-county managers coming out bitching and moaning. We've just lived through an unprecedented, and are living through an unprecedented global panic and pandemic. These are exceptional times. It's not an ideal scenario. You're not going to have a 6-month build-up to one crucial championship game. Just accept it. Everybody should be on the same hymn sheet here. Okay, club players can go back. Every player can go back and train hard for 2-3 months with their club, and you get a full month, 4 or 5 weeks. It's not ideal. It's not perfect, but it's an amateur game. It's meant to be an amateur game. Everybody will be in the same boat. Just go with it. Put the head down and say, you know what? There's greater issues in the world right now. We're just going to do this for 1 year.
And perhaps feel privileged that there is an opportunity this year to actually get to contest in All Ireland.
It's contesting All Ireland, but also, like, we all know the stresses and strains people are under. Players, club players, need to get out training. They need to get out playing matches. They need to go and be able to express themselves, and just to ease the anxiety and the burden that's been on them. Yet, all the talk again is the inter-county game. When can they get back? When can they get back? The sooner the better. Like, it's important. We all want those big championship days. We'd all love to see, even behind closed doors, some form of an inter-county championship. But why? Everything else in the world is going to be different after this. Why shouldn't Gaelic football? Just get on with it.
It's not like the club players have a massive run in either once fixed training is allowed. There is a slight sense of entitlement if an inter-county manager is saying, well, we need to get our players back. It's not as if the club players are sitting on their hands waiting for this championship to start. They are hamstrung by the GAA return to play. It's not in line with the government protocols. It's far more cautious than that. And as a result, the club player will have a fairly short turnaround between going back to training and starting competition. Some will say that that is not nearly enough. And in an ideal world, they would like to be back earlier, but they can't. So what happens then is that the inter-county manager starts pulling into the club calendar. Like, I don't really think that's acceptable. And if inter-county managers are going to preach the fact that everybody starts with their club and every manager starts with their club, like, maybe actually following that through and practicing what you preach in that regard mightn't be the worst thing in the world. And you look across at all your rivals, if everybody's in the same boat, surely that softens your cough a small bit.
Well, I couldn't believe it. And maybe the GAA rushed into releasing this on Friday night, considering it was so close to the government's updated release from lockdown plans. And you even see in that Colm Keys article, again, with players going back to club training, club championship, that there does seem to be more flexibility than was there even a few days ago. But you would have assumed with the inter-county game not back till the middle of October, the club championship, you could have most club championship finals around the first weekend in October. Straight away, you're hearing the stories of, well, inter-county managers want the club championship wrapped up by the middle of September by the time inter-county training. I'm sorry. If you're a county board and you're letting your manager have that much sway, what the hell are you doing there? Like, you will never have a better time to put the foot down and say, there's a greater good here.
That will be a very interesting dynamic between inter-county managers and county boards. Who actually does have the power in these sort of mini political situations? It will be very interesting to see. It might actually be a case where the bigger, not the bigger counties, but perhaps the more successful counties actually may in turn have a weaker club championship because their inter-county managers saying, we have a chance of winning the All-Ireland in hurling or football. What are you doing taking up the club championship? And as a result, some of the weaker counties on the inter-county scene could have a far more vibrant club championship. I don't know, that's just a theory. It's interesting that you bring that up because the lead story in the Irish Examiner is on this very subject. It's John Fogarty, his piece, the headline, Counties will breach training date, insists Daesh boss Cahill. So this is Liam Cahill, who's got some interesting quotes in this, which go along with what you say. If anybody is naive to think that inter-county managers are not going to try and assemble their players on the odd occasion during that period, well then, they're really not in tune with what is going on. The big obstacle we can see is the county teams not being able to assemble until mid-September, but a championship possibly starting in October. It makes it really difficult. I would assume you've got little to no sympathy for Liam Cahill's predicament here, Nathan.
Here, if they want to get their squads together for the odd session here or there, fine. But it is going to be difficult. Everything is difficult at the moment. Like, it's tough. Get over it. These are not normal times. You're going to have to work in a slightly constrained sense. I don't think anyone would have an issue with county managers getting players together the odd time to keep things ticking over, to know who the squad is, to put them on a separate training regime if needs be. But if we're going to go with 6-8 weeks of hard club action, they should be with their clubs. They should be, okay, they can train separately, they can get themselves to a higher level of fitness than other club players. But to suggest that we're going to go back to a normal sort of February, March time of the year in the middle of summer while the club championship is gone, I think is like just totally disrespectful to the club game and to what players have gone through outside of Gaelic football and hurling over the last few months. Just let them play.
Elsewhere in the Irish Examiner this morning, you've got a photograph from Naas yesterday. The Naas chief thrilled as racing makes welcome return. The worst insult I ever heard, meanwhile, was go back to your cotton fields. So this is Franz Sauerland, the young Kerry footballer from Gaeltacht, 19-year-old plays from Gaeltacht in Kerry. At least he'd been an underage footballer with Kerry. He did an interview in Irish with Sean McEntee, and he says, people ask me, what are you doing in this country? Why are you playing the sport? Go back to your own country. The worst insult I ever heard was go back to your cotton fields. That upset me. I feel that it's completely wrong. It upsets me when I hear those things, but I have fantastic teammates who stand up for me and support me whenever it happens. So just the latest in a long line of terrible anecdotes that we're hearing from young Irish sports people at the moment. And the other story there on the front of the Irish Examiner sports section, hopefully now there's an end in sight, says Rovers skipper Finn. So this is Ronan Finn, the Shamrock Rovers captain, who admits he got out of bed in the morning with an added spring in his step when he heard about the return to play protocols.
At the back of the Irish Times, Brian O'Connor has the story, Racing restarts in style as Foley claims a famous four-timer. This is a story that Shane Foley had a four-timer at Naas yesterday, and there's some pictures there of the setup behind closed doors, and also how the media are having to conduct their interviews. Obviously, the HRI taking every precaution, because I guess optics, particularly when you're one of the first sports back, are absolutely massive. Everybody's just waiting to jump on you if you do the wrong thing or if people are too close together. So as you can see there, there was a good separation, and we can chat to Oisin Murphy shortly as well about what it was like over in Newmarket at the weekend. And again, the GAA, Ian O'Riordan, no decision on championship format just yet. The GAA's plans dependent on successive government's reopening roadmap. So this similar lines to Colm Keys, that it feels as though there's going to be an ongoing conversation between the GAA and the government, and that while the GAA are coming out with plans, that they're not set in stone, they're not that solid, and if things are opening up around the country a little bit quicker, that they're going to respond to that. That's been quite clear, I think, since a month ago when John Horan said that things wouldn't resume while social distancing remains in place. Yet now we have all these plans. And again, touches on that story there, John Horan talking with his club Nafina on their television station. GAA clubs with television stations, what will they think of next? About how many people will be allowed into Croke Park. Tony Houlihan sort of rubbishing that yesterday, though again I think Tony Houlihan saying right now it's probably too early, and also how much power when it comes down to this will Tony Houlihan have in making that decision as to whether Croke Park can be reopened or not.
Maybe the GAA are just saying, well, we're going to take your advice, Tony, and actually be more cautious than your advice. If you just let us be a little bit less cautious than your advice when it comes to reopening Croke Park, give a little, get a little, perhaps. It would also be interesting to see if they try and drag the arse out of the whole thing, the GAA, if they actually end up getting stadiums with a half full capacity or whatever, and then it's like, let's actually drag this thing all the way through to January or February next year to ensure that we can have a convoluted championship, more games, more revenue, and all that sort of thing. Like, that could be one of the potential reasons why there's no fixed format just yet, or could also more realistically be a situation where they just don't know if they can get the thing off the ground yet. The London Times this morning leads with a photograph of the players of Borussia Mönchengladbach celebrating in front of their supporters in cardboard cutout form. Brighton are charging £20 to be a cardboard fan. Supporters can pay to have image in the ground for final 5 home games of the season. The main story, though, is from Raheem Sterling, who was speaking on Newsnight last night. Black managers are ignored, he says. Sterling says Gerrard and Lampard give him prime jobs while Cole and Campbell miss out. Extremely strong stuff from Raheem Sterling last night. He says there's something like 500 players in the Premier League, a third of them are black, and we have no representation in the hierarchy, no representation in the coaching staff. He talks about Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard getting their jobs. Then he talks about Sol Campbell's and Ashley Cole's having similarly great careers, all playing for England at the same time. They've all done their respective coaching badges to coach at the highest level, and the two that haven't been given the right opportunities are the 2 black former players. Also in the London Times this morning, there is news today that the salary cap is to be cut by £1 million. This is to do with rugby in the UK. Premiership rugby clubs have voted to cut the salary cap from £7 million to £6 million over the course of the next 2 years to try and fix their broken financial model. And amateurs face solo marathon. So this is entrance for this year's London Marathon in October. May be encouraged to run the distance solo to raise money for their chosen charities if revised plans for a mass participation race have now been aborted.
On the back of the Irish Mail, the pictures of Natalia Coyle, who was back in training at the National Aquatic Centre yesterday. All our elite athletes allowed return to training. More stories there on the possibility of fans returning to stadiums. The IRFU push for fans to attend August Interpros. Rory Keane has this story. As we know, the IRFU hoping to return August 22nd, Leinster against Munster at the Aviva Stadium, and they're looking into the possibility of, again, can things be fast forwarded, that they have some sort of attendance at those games. We've seen in New Zealand that new rugby tournament's going to start this weekend with full stadiums with no issues at all. Now they have, it seems, completely killed off the virus in New Zealand. They're at a very different stage still to where we are in this country. But it's incredible how quickly the conversation has turned. I would still be of the belief that we won't see supporters in stadiums for quite a while. And maybe if you're running these organisations, you have to be optimistic. But for the IRFU to be hoping to get fans in August is in many ways very promising, if they're getting information that maybe we're not fully on top of. And they're following the lead of the RFU. We're hoping to get 40,000 into Twickenham over the next little while. And also, again, returning to GAA, movable east, Connacht Chief ready to take final to Croker. This is a story that John Prenti isn't against bringing the Connacht football final to Croke Park. You wouldn't be surprised if all the provincial finals, if almost all the big games took place at Croke Park towards the end of the season, if the intention is to get as many people as possible into these games.
Might have to be the case, for sure. Back page of the Irish Daily Star is "This has to change. Sterling anger at lack of opportunities for black managers in the Premier League." Tributes for United hero Tony, as we've already mentioned, and Irish racing's back. Racing returned at Naas yesterday with jockey Shane Foley enjoying a 13,218 to 1 four-timer, which was a fairly incredible day for him. Reds given green light. This is Liverpool, who've been clear to win the title on Merseyside after the city's mayor and police said they will not push for games to be played at neutral venues. And then you've also got more on that Franz Sauerland story. G18 hits out at abuse.
At the back of the Sun, Neil to make a stand. Premier League chiefs, we must address this as a league, and also conversations ongoing as to what sort of gesture the Premier League players and clubs can make next week when the league restarts as a symbol of solidarity. And on the left-hand side, a couple of stories regarding transfer news in Manchester United. One of them revolving around James Rodriguez, who seems to be linked with Manchester United every summer, but now in a cut-price deal, potentially for James Rodriguez. And also that Chelsea are going to go head-to-head with Manchester United for Kai Havertz. So that's the stories in the back of the Sun.
Would you take James now, if you're a United fan?
Like a midfield of Paul Pogba, James Rodriguez,
Bruno Fernandes.
and Bruno Fernandes is going to concede a lot of goals.
Well, you know, just
maybe you go with play Scott McTominay in behind.
Yeah, play a little diamond. Bring back the diamond.
Who's playing at the top of the diamond? So you play
Bruno
Pogba
Fernandes
on the left, Bruno Fernandes top, Pogba left, James Rodriguez right, and McTominay or Matic at the base.
A lot of running for Scott McTominay.
Yeah, you might want to spend a couple of £100 million in your defence there as well, I think.
If you had a blank checkbook, who do you sign? James Rodriguez or Philippe Coutinho?
Philippe Coutinho.
Just
been
checking.
there, done that in the Premier League.
His stock
Knows
hasn't
what it's
plummeted
all
that
about.
far.
Well, no, he's obviously had some issues since he left Liverpool, struggled at Barcelona, struggled to get in the team, has had injury problems at Bayern Munich this season. Like, he's shown he can do it at a very, very high level. Has James Rodriguez showed that as consistently as Coutinho? I'm not quite sure. And I think as well, you go back to how good Coutinho, like there is quite a bit of hindsight because of how successful Liverpool have gone on to be since he left. He was Liverpool's best player by a country mile for a couple of seasons. Was absolutely brilliant. Maybe again didn't have the consistency you would want at times to bring them to that next level. But I don't think there was any great questions about his talent.
If Liverpool were looking at Timo Werner as some sort of, I don't know, failsafe or some sort of backup who could potentially slot seamlessly into the first team because, I don't know, Real Madrid could stump up the cash for Sadio Mane or something like that, do you think that in a similar role they could revisit the Philippe Coutinho situation?
I don't think so. I don't know where he plays right now for Liverpool.
Yeah, he doesn't fit in that front three, does he?
They've changed. Werner would have been a perfect fit because he plays out on the left-hand side a lot. He can play through the middle if needs be as well. He would have given them a lot of options as a fourth option. What a fourth option he would have been if Liverpool had gone there. Whereas Coutinho, Liverpool have changed their system completely. He was the main man. Everything pretty much went through Philippe Coutinho, where that's not the case. You could put him out on the left-hand side. Is he going to be quite as effective? Is he going to get on the ball as much out there? Do you have him as a replacement for Roberto Firmino as sort of a false nine in a more advanced role? I just don't see the way Liverpool have gone in the last couple of seasons to been a place for Coutinho anymore.
Let's wrap up the papers this morning. The back page of the Mirror is "This must change." These four are all Premier legends, but the two who haven't been given the right chances in management are black. Sterling's powerful message to stamp out racism in football. Victory for Kop in Derby. Meanwhile, Liverpool can win the Premier League on Merseyside, as we've mentioned. United hero Tony dies. This is Tony Dunne. He's passed away at the age of 78, as we've been speaking about. And Sonia says, "I had to take it on chin." Sonia O'Sullivan insists the IAAF's failure to investigate the Chinese athletes who came from nowhere in the 1990s to dominate is a shadow that hangs over her sport. So that is the Irish Daily Mirror this morning.
And finally, the Telegraph also touching on the racism issue within English football. Kick It Out tells Game that Rooney Rule is not fit for purpose. And when you look at the lack of black coaches within English football, it's hard to disagree with that. And tokenistic to diversity is approach to the diversity issue is tokenistic, says Chris Ramsey. And again, I think there's a feeling that maybe the Rooney Rule is giving clubs a bit of a get out, that they're ticking all the boxes without actually doing a huge amount. And at the top of the page there, we touched on this yesterday, clubs agreed to slash salary cap to 5 million. Marquee player rule also reduced from 2 to 1. Changes begin in 2021-22 season to heal fractured finances of English Premiership rugby. So we all know what happened with Saracens, but this lockdown and the financial fallout from COVID-19 is going to be pretty disastrous, you feel, for rugby around the world, and particularly for English football or English rugby with the way it was going. So they've taken some steps to try and address that.
The Guardian leads with this League One row, which has erupted because teams have started training before key vote. So 4 sides in line for playoff places under EFL have been tested and they have trained ahead of other clubs. So naturally, a bit of controversy there in League One. And Lewis Hamilton there says a memorial should replace the Edward Colston statue in Bristol, which was, of course, thrown into the river, which you might have seen over the course of the weekend. That statue should stay in the river, he says.
And finally, the Racing Post, some big German Cup action tonight on the back of the Racing Post. Cup sensation Saarbrucken are taking on Bayer Leverkusen. Saarbrucken are in the 4th tier of German football, but they're in the German Cup semi-final up against Bayer Leverkusen, who were battered at the weekend by Bayern Munich. So if you like yourself a little cup upset, maybe that'll keep you going this evening.
And a great headline there in the front of the Racing Post. Nice to see you, to see an ace, is the headline on the return of the Racing Post. Right, let's have a look at the OTB Sports App this morning. The brand new app, of course. If you've been hiding under a rock for the last week, it is out now in the App Store and the Google Play Store. When you open the app, you land on your personalised home feed with some of our top stories. There's also the radio tab, as you can see there, where you can get OTB Sports Radio all day long. You can also listen to OTB AM, minimise the OTB Sports app and work away on other apps as well. And our latest video is available on the video tab, and then there's the OTB Podcast Network as well, as you can see. To download for free, just search OTB Sports app into OTB Sports, I should say, into the App Store or onto the Google Play Store.